Welcome to the Creative Community Podcast presented by Destination Arate. I'm David.
And I'm Mark, and we're building a community of creatives who work together to achieve creative excellence. Today's guest is an excellent landscape artist, Dan Schultz.
Dan joins us today to talk about his approach to landscape painting, coming from a graphic design background right out of college, as well as the personal enjoyment that he finds painting his home, the Ojai Valley.
Yeah, he compares and contrasts the foundation that he received from a liberal arts college and then how he grew as an artist when pursuing kind of a more focused art education. He also shares with us a shape-shifting experience that he had at a William Wendt show about 10 years into his career. So if you want to find out what that's all about, jump into our interview with landscape artist Dan Schultz.
I'm Dan Schultz, and I've been painting for, I think, about 20 years now. And I can kind of go through some of that story if you guys want to, but it's been an interesting journey, not really having grown up around art very much. It was kind of a in process sort of experience coming into art and figuring out what direction that I wanted to go in. And so right now I have my own little storefront gallery and a studio space that's combined. And that's what's sort of made things work for me in terms of making a living at it with fine art. And what I'm working on now are just continuing to sort of do local landscapes of the area where I live, Ojai, California. I just finished like a 24 by 24 coastal scene from Santa Barbara, which isn't too far away. And then I like, painting the orchards here in the Ojai Valley too. So I'm kind of always keeping those on the easel as well.
Yeah, you got one behind you, one of your orchard paintings. So
yeah, great. I was gonna point my camera around if you guys want to see my little space here.
Yeah, go for it. We put these on YouTube, so those who are watching on YouTube will have a chance just to see the area.
So that's my fancy red wall.
The famous red wall from Instagram.
That's right. So it's just little storefront, not huge, but I've got paintings on the floor. They just came back from a gallery in cool. Santa Fe that I'm working with. But anyway, so that's kind of my red sort of accent wall. And then I've got a cool little archway toward the back where my studio space is. And other side here is just more paintings. So it's been a nice way to display here in the front room. And then the back is the messier, nice. A little messier studio space, but I got my easel there, and also kind of paintings all around. So
very cool. That's
it's a good creative space.
Yeah, I've not seen that idea before, where you display up front and work in. It's all in one spot, so you can still interface if someone walks in, but you're still getting work done in the meantime.
Yeah, it's nice because I'm basically right around the corner from kind of the main drag. So it's a little cheaper to be kind of on the side street here, but I'm just half a block around the corner. So, I do get spaces where no one's coming in, mostly during the week. Weekends are a little busier, but you never know when someone's going to pop in. So you do have to sort of get used to the possibility of being interrupted, which isn't for everyone. Some artists wouldn't be able to handle that, but I've sort of gotten used to it. And I think people do enjoy meeting the artist, and sort of seeing stuff in progress or seeing sort of the space where you're working. And so I think that's been kind of part of what makes it appealing to people.
Yeah. I was going to ask, do you have a lot of people who are like, can I see what you're working on? Or do you try to keep that space kind of sacred?
No, I keep it open because I actually have art back there that I want people to see too. So
great.
I've got like stacks of paintings that they can flip through and drawings and, stuff like that. And so I kind of invite them back there usually. So if something's half done, they kind of seem to enjoy seeing, the palette and all the stuff. And so and really the interesting thing is we're in kind of a little touristy town. So I do have, friends who pop in, but most of the time it's new people that just haven't even been in before. So I'm usually having to kind of explain, I'm the artist, it's all my own work, like welcome to come in the back, just so people know and feel welcome to do that. Otherwise, I've had interesting comments, occasionally from people who don't know that, they're my paintings.
Oh no.
and people will, make comments. And so I try to kind of get that out of the way relatively quickly, just so that people are aware.
Oh, that's
I'm the
great.
artist. I'm the artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Don't say anything you might regret. No, but I've had people, because with my door open, I can hear people out at the window too, at the front window. And it's kind of amazing what people will say when they don't know they can be heard, just as far as, oh, I could paint that, or, they can't believe the prices or whatever.
Mhm.
So, but that's actually kind of part of why I've enjoyed having my little space, because people who just don't have any connection with art can, if they come in, they can actually, it's fun to be able to teach them a bit about what goes into it, and they can get a bit of an understanding of why are these the prices, and I think that starts to make sense once they jump in a little bit. So it's been fun, especially when kids come in, because like I said, I didn't really grow up around art. So to encourage a little kid, I try to give them like a little bookmark or something that I've made, just to encourage them that, hey, if you want to be an artist someday, it's possible. And I hadn't known that growing up. So
I love that idea.
yeah.
Wow. You get both the Art Educator of the Year award and the thickest skin award for
Oh, you do have to develop a thick skin. Yeah, that's true.
That's awesome. You have a graphic design background, admittedly, on your website, you say you worked in graphic design. So we're curious to know, now that you're a landscape painter, what unique perspective do you bring to designing landscapes that you maybe picked up as a graphic designer, or that, other fine artists, if they just came from an illustration background, might not have kind of floating around in their heads?
Well, I was thinking about that, when you guys sent me the questions earlier, and I don't know that I have any major difference than another painter would have. I think I just somehow realized early on that design was a major part of, this type of work, whether it's graphic on the computer or landscape or figure or whatever you're doing. And I think that probably goes all the way back to, Brian Jekyll and others who were kind of training me at PCC, because I went into it just knowing very little. And so it was really the foundation for me there, where we were doing a lot of drawing. We didn't really get into color until, year 3. And it was just that drawing and design focus. And I think that just stuck with me. And when I graduated, it was the commercial art degree is what I got. I really was unsure of what to do next, because I thought, I don't know how to become a freelance illustrator. And so I'm just going to, I guess, find a job doing graphic design. That seemed the easiest thing to do, but I still enjoyed the drawing and painting. And it was just hard for me to figure out, how do I put these together in a way that's not too difficult to achieve, right out of the box. And so it was, took a job doing graphic design just at a little print shop back in Colorado, where I was from. And, and it got stressful. That's when I kind of realized this wasn't really what I wanted to do forever. And partially it was just that particular shop. I was the graphic designer. It was the jobs would come in through the salespeople and go through me to the printers, to the guys on the presses. And so it was I was this funnel, and if a rush job came in, I'd have to shift things and try to get that done. And so after a couple of years of that, I was like, I gotta figure something different out, and so I took a different job doing graphic design for a book publisher, Association of Christian Schools International, and I was helping them design textbooks. And so it was, book layout, nothing super exciting. But that was about the time that I discovered and met some artists that were painting for galleries. And that was the first that I had, met anybody like that. So this was a couple of years after graduation, and I was finally finding that that turning point where I said, this is the way that I want to go. And I knew it was still going to be an uphill road, starting from, it's hard to not make comparisons, to other artists who maybe had more of a head start. And I don't like to do that if I can help it, because everybody's got their own, challenges. But it seemed like comparing myself to other artists who had grown up knowing they wanted to be a painter, maybe they had a parent who was a professional artist, or somebody that could kickstart them and get them a little bit of a head start. That was not what my reality was. And so it was a lot more learning, I felt like, while I was still trying to just get better at painting. And that takes a long time. So I was still working graphic design during the day. I was trying to paint at night and on the weekends, and started to approach some galleries. And anyway, that's kind of getting off track. But basically, I think it does all go back to that initial training in design, and just realizing even today that often when I'm out looking for subject matter, it's a design that first catches my eye, a layout of shapes, rather than maybe a color effect or a value, contrast situation. It's usually some design element that I'm like, ooh, that's a cool, arrangement. So anyway, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, as someone who tries to paint myself, was there a moment when,
and you have some good work, Mark. I looked at your stuff. You've got some good ability. Yeah.
Well, praise the Lord. I'm curious to know, when did you go from seeing like trees as trees, and then all of a sudden you started seeing them as shapes? Like, because you're talking about it's when you get around artists and they're talking about abstraction, I'm just looking at these shapes, going to move this around here and here, you can be like, right, that's a tree, dude. Like, I don't think you can move that. Like, that's a tree,
That's
so
when it's growing
right, yeah, there's roots.
Growing down.
So when did that click for you along your artistic journey, where you were like, wait, that's just a series of abstract shapes? Or has that clicked? Are you still working through that?
Well, I think it was a very slow click. I know that I was aware of that for years. Even jumping into plein air painting and all of that. I did take a few workshops with some professional landscape painters, Matt Smith and Skip Whitcomb. Are two that I studied with, another guy named Chuck Mardos, who lives in Colorado. And all of them, we're all working with the same fundamental ideas. And so I knew, the theory of things being shapes. And even as I started teaching on my own, I incorporated that into my lessons. We're trying to see shapes, not objects. But I think a major turning point for me came, let's see, what year was that? I think it was probably 2010. We're still living in Colorado. We came out for a visit to California, and I caught the last day of a show of William Wendt. He was one of the early California Impressionist painters, Wendt, William Wendt. And at the Laguna Art Museum in Laguna Beach, it was just a major show of his work. And I think I had maybe seen one or two of his paintings in the past, but to see so many together was really impactful. And if you look up his work, he's representational, but it's stylized. Like it still looks realistic, but you can see from a glance that it's a painting. It doesn't meld into looking photographic or overly rendered. It's like, okay, that's paint, And I remember even going, like, looking from one room in the museum to the next room and seeing a painting on that far wall and being like, I can still tell that's a painting way over there. It doesn't look like a photograph or something. So just seeing up close what he was able to do with shapes. And he was kind of almost architectural in the way he would lay the paint down. A rock would look structural, or a tree mass. And I think that was the first sort of, light bulb that I realized how simply he was taking these shapes and making them read as realistic. And it came for me at a really important point, because at that time I had been painting for about 10 years, and I was at a place where I had developed enough ability that I could render everything to death. And I was losing some of the joy of it, because I knew, oh, I need to soften this more, and I need to still, just refine everything too much. It was just, I felt like I had to do so much, because I'd learned how to do it. Like, I need to soften this, I need to adjust that. And seeing what he was doing freed me from feeling like I had to do that. And it was almost like he gave me permission to be simpler, just seeing what he was doing. And it just made so much sense to me. And the cool part, because I went home, and I was like, well, I want to try to incorporate some of this stuff. I want to maybe outline a tree, or, fiddle around with stylistic ideas. And in a way, I was kind of, this background voice is going, well, you don't want to just rip off William Wendt. But the cool thing that happened then was, as I started to explore that, I ended up looking back through some of my older paintings from, those first 10 years, and realizing there were some elements there that reminded me of some of the things I saw in Wendt's paintings. And it made me realize, like, the reason that his work appealed to me was because there was something already in me that was wanting to go that same way. You know what I mean? And so it really was like he was just saying, if you want to paint like this, paint like this. You don't have to refine it all just because you can. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that was maybe the thing that in my mind sticks out as the time where I realized, okay, these are shapes that we're messing with, two-dimensional, and I need to just be simpler, basically.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really encouraging for me, because to hear that it was 10 years of painting consistently that then allowed you to have that body of work to look back on and say, wow, he's been there the whole time. That's really encouraging for me, because as a young artist, it feels like, there is that pensiveness with the brush, to be like, well, I'm not the best painter yet, so I shouldn't paint. But that was so cool to hear that you had that. It was because you just went for it and painted and learned as much as you could, that then you could make that give yourself that freedom. That's so cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course. Yeah.
I want to ask you a follow-up to that, but I know we need to move through these questions. But I just wonder if in graphic design, you have to be like, especially working for a print shop or for textbooks, you have to be 6 inches on the margin, and for like, you have to be like right on the money, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if you were, maybe you came into painting with that, like on that side of the spectrum, and seeing William's work really helped you realize that you could start to swing this way. And like you said, you wanted to, and it was there, but you just needed to realize, like, oh, I have this specificity I can render, and I just need to kind of simplify or something like that. I don't know if you experienced that, or if you thought about it at the time, or if I'm way off base,
No, I don't think I've thought of it in those terms, but I bet there's something to that idea. Just freeing yourself. And I think it's also tied up in the fact that as a necessity, we all have to kind of be our critic. We have to be our own worst critic. And so everybody falls in a different place on the spectrum of perfectionism, but we all want to do our best. We want our work to look as good as it possibly can. So it's hard to free yourself, even in just those terms, from feeling like, well, I got to get this better. I have to make it better. And that's another thing that's so refreshing about looking at paintings by, old masters or, artists who came before, because you'll look at some of the stuff in their work and go, wow, I never would have left that like that. I would have fixed this thing right here,
Yeah.
And part of it is like, that's so cool that they left it like that, And so I think it's just part of the natural trajectory, I think, of artists in their work, is you over time are you're getting more efficient, So you're not necessarily getting faster. I mean, you do get faster at painting and being able to match colors and all that stuff, but you're not necessarily, it's not about the speed, it's about the efficiency, so that you're seeing things accurately and then rendering them more simply so that they read well and it hasn't taken you as much time. So that's another thing that kind of happens automatically, I think. And a lot of artists that you look at their body of work, you sort of see maybe that happening over time where they start out a little tighter, maybe they're loosening as they go. And of course, there's exceptions like John Singer Sargent, or, you know, painters who just had the ability from the beginning, it seemed like. So, you know, for the rest of us, it's a lot of just work and repetition and trying not to get discouraged too much in the meantime.
Yeah. Wow. I want to talk to you like for an hour about like that word. You said efficiency, and my mind was like, that is a podcast topic that is an hour-long discussion. Like, that's so cool. So, oh man, but we will refrain this time.
All right.
Maybe
anytime. Hey, we can follow up anytime. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, part 2 coming soon. Efficiency.
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we wanted to talk to you a little bit about Ojai Valley specifically. So it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
You've shown us your studio and your storefront that's located in Ojai. And we wanted to ask you, what are the unique challenges and joys of painting the landscape of Ojai Valley?
Well, there aren't a lot of challenges. I was thinking about that too. I mean, you know, the normal challenges of painting outdoors with weather and bugs and all of that. I mean, that's anywhere you go. But we're pretty spoiled here. Really, you can paint outdoors year round, and other than a few weeks in the summer when it gets to be 105, it's pretty nice the rest of the year. And so, you know, things are green. We've got citrus orchards and avocado orchards, and so those stay green even in the heat of summer when everything else is golden brown. So it's nice to have that range. And coming from Colorado, which was, you know, a much more seasonal kind of place, where from, I don't know, October through, you know, March, it's brown and gray and sometimes white. You just don't get a lot of green until the spring, and then you're just dying for it. So that's something that I love about Ojai, and I guess just, you know, Southern California is pretty amazing in that way. And Ojai Valley still has a lot of kind of rural feel to it. It's not a huge valley, but we've got mountains all the way around, and pretty striking ones, you know, again, different than what you'd see in Colorado, but there's just so much variety of subject matter here that I feel like I'm still enjoying. It still kind of feels new, you know, even after 10 years of being here. And so the benefits are, that, you know, a lot of variety. If I want to paint an orchard, I can literally drive 5 minutes and find a decent spot. The mountain shadows we get are pretty awesome. And I haven't even really ventured much up into the mountains, but there's a lot of elevation gain. We're about 800 feet here in the valley floor. And I think the tallest peak is like over 6,000. So it's a pretty good range of height, you know, and so it feels like you've got pretty big mountains there. And the other nice thing is, even when it's hot, we are about 25 minutes from the coast. So we could drive down to Ventura or, you know, a nearby place like that, and it'll be sometimes 20 to 30 degrees cooler down there, which is amazing since it's so close. It's like 14 miles to Ventura. So I feel like, you know, then we've got the whole coastal stuff to explore too. About an hour from Malibu and about 45 minutes from Santa Barbara. So there's really just a lot of cool, different kinds of landscape to explore in this small area. So yeah, it's really a beautiful area to paint.
Sounds like one of the challenges would be deciding what to paint.
Yeah, it really can be. And like I said, I don't have to go far. I feel so blessed to not have to go far to find a good subject,
Yeah.
and that's unusual for most people. I feel really lucky that I don't have to go too far to find things. But it can be tough to know and decide, well, which way do I want to go today? And what should I try to paint? So yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah. Wow, I think that podcast that we were going to have about efficiency just happened, because you seem to have positioned yourself in the most efficient place to get great stuff.
That's actually maybe kind of true. Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, that was part of the excitement that I had in coming here initially. The main reason behind the move from Colorado to California was to open the storefront, which I had not done before, but that's really what's made it possible to make a living at it. And at the same time, to have such a beautiful area, of surroundings for painting has just been such a nice bonus. So it was both of those things that were really exciting about making that move.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you miss painting in Colorado, because it's been, you painted for 10 years there, 10 years here, but sounds like you have a pretty good way of comparing the two and you have a favorite.
Yeah. And obviously there's beautiful places in Colorado too. And I feel like just where I was living there, I just felt like I had to do more work to get to good locations. And maybe I'm just being lazy here now, but I feel like I have a lot of good locations without having to go far. But, California also has the Sierra Nevada mountains, which are spectacular. And that's about, depending on where you go, maybe 5 or 6 hours away. And you can get some pretty amazing, alpine kind of stuff up there. So we have that possibility in the area too. And so, yeah, there are things that I miss about the Colorado scenes. It is fun to paint snow, and there's a lot of neat ideas you can come up with for snow scenes. So I definitely am not doing many of those these days.
Hey guys, it's David. Just wanted to take a quick minute to remind you about VisionX Live, the virtual art conference being put on by Sentient Academy. Keith and Brian over there working really hard to bring you an amazing lineup of incredible artists who will be presenting, demoing, participating in panels, and talking about the future of art, both from the digital and the traditional side of things, and how those two mediums can work together to advance your art ideas, education, style, everything. As I mentioned, Dan will be there. Other guests that we have had on, Stephanie Page Thompson, Jared Brady, Mike Malm, Ellie Wilson, all of those and more will be presenting during the conference. So visit visionxlive.com to find out more about it. And send us a message if you're interested in going. We really want to know how many people are curious to find out more about the conference, and if we can get you any information that would help decide for you whether or not you can make it. There's several different packages where you can purchase the ability to replay the conference after it ends. And so if you are interested in doing that, please let us know. And so let's get you back to our conversation with Dan. He's going to talk specifically about his art education and what he'll be doing at VisionX Live.
Can you compare and contrast your experience artistically at PCC versus Cottonwood Art Academy? And I'm specifically interested in what place gave you what thing.
I'll try to answer that. That's kind of a tough one. But yeah, like I said, I went into PCC, to college, with just such a limited knowledge of any of the art stuff. I mean, I had taken a couple classes in high school, and so I had a basic idea of what kind of could go into art. But some of my classmates at PCC were, far better than I was in terms of painting and just having some experience with some of the different mediums and things. And for me, it was just all new. And so I feel like I was just kind of a blank slate there, really just taking it in as far as, well, and it was great the way that they started with such of a basic, understanding of drawing, and really not letting us kind of go out of bounds too far before we were sort of ready. And, you can say what you want about that approach, but I think there was value in that for me, because I felt like from the beginning, I recognized I had some ability, but that I had a lot to learn. And so going in with just that drawing focus, I remember being really surprised and kind of amazed at what I put out in my first semester, in terms of just projects. And I remember my parents also being like, wow, you did all this stuff, and it was kind of amazing to go from not having done anything really like that much to all these projects, and just getting that idea of the importance of the drawing and the value, light and dark contrast. Like those were really important pieces for me to build off of. So then when we went into color and started to be able to explore that, I consider that to be kind of a basic understanding. And like I said, painting just takes a long time to start to feel like you're in control and know what you're wanting to do and how to do it. And that's just the nature of it. And that's where I feel like somebody who goes to art school maybe just automatically comes out ahead, because they've had, hundreds of hours more in each medium than I had coming out of, PCC. But I had enough of the basic elements of it, of the understanding to build on, I think, is basically what it was. And I remember I feel like it was my last few weeks at PCC, a bunch of us in my class suddenly were like, we're going to go paint outside. And that was not being offered at the school at that time. I don't know if it is now, but we're like, we're going to go plein air painting. So we got all of our crazy gear and, went down somewhere along the waterfront down there. And it was a disaster. I did like a 16 by 20 and it fell on the sand, like face down. And so, it was a, I don't know, baptism by fire of painting outdoors. And I just remember that was kind of the cap off of college. There was like, okay, I'm at this point, now what? And I, wanted to try these things. So I went back to Colorado, and I think right around that same time, I was like, well, I got to keep trying this outdoor painting thing. Like, and I don't even remember exactly what it was that was attracting me to that, other than possibly Richard Schmid's book, Alla Prima, because he talks a lot about working from life and all of that. And so I knew that there was some importance to doing that, even though we hadn't really done that at college. So I was lugging my gear outside in Colorado and trying to figure out plein air painting. And so, like I said, a couple of years after doing that graphic design at the print shop, I moved to Colorado Springs for that other job. And that's where I first met these artists at Cottonwood Art Academy. And it was just a small place started by an artist who taught some classes himself and then invited some national kind of workshop people to come in and teach. So for me, it was just like, wow, I didn't know you could do this. And I remember a couple of conversations at PCC about galleries. And it was just this topic of like, oh, you can, if you ever get in a gallery, they have to invite you, like you can't go get in a gallery. And so the way that I had perceived all of that, it was like, well, I guess that's off the table. It's not something that you can do. So it was kind of exciting for me to then realize, oh, all these artists that I'm meeting are showing in galleries. Like, that's really cool. And so I took a couple classes at Cottonwood, and then, like I said, Matt Smith, Skip Whitcomb, Chuck Mardos, and the artist name that started the school was Sparky LeBold. So I took some classes from those guys, and then they asked me to teach there, which was exciting. And I think probably this is a side note, but one of the saving graces, I think, of being an artist is not realizing how should I say it? I was going to say not realizing how bad we are in terms of our ability, but like thinking we're better than we are. That's the way to say it. Because otherwise, I think we would get so discouraged, realizing like how far we have to go. But thankfully, along the way, there are these little glimmers of, oh, this was working in this painting, it encourages you to keep going. Like, you realize you're getting somewhere. And even though you might love this little painting you did, and you look at it the year after and go, what in the world was I thinking? That's a terrible painting, And so, like I say, it's kind of a saving grace that it's incremental like that, because otherwise I think we would all just give up. But going into teaching and feeling like, I felt like I had a lot of information I could share. I know I still wasn't, super, didn't have a lot of ability at being a great painter yet, but that helped me a lot to start to teach, because it made me figure out how to verbalize what I was thinking and doing. And I think it's so easy to just do what you're doing without thinking about it, and so it really helped me, I think, to have to think through the process and go, well, why am I doing this way? And is there a better way to do this? So
Yeah.
I think that helped me too. And so I think some of the things I picked up more from Cottonwood was not necessarily from those particular classes, but it was just learning from these other artists. Like, how do you get into a gallery, and what can I learn from the business part of this in terms of how to maybe make a living someday, And so that to me was more of a hands-on, like, fine art sort of focus, versus PCC that was more of a broad, commercial art. You can do illustration, you can do graphic design. There's these different ways you can take it. And that was even really before a lot of the computer animation stuff, which has gotten so big now too, as another avenue that you can take. So anyway, I think that was kind of the difference from Cottonwood, what I learned there in terms of the comparison to PCC.
That is super helpful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Because I've seen a kind of a pattern where the people, no matter what school you go to, the people who continue seeking opportunities to learn after they graduate and continue pushing, it's so fun to see, because I think every school has a look. Like, when you graduate from there as a senior, your work is kind of a watered down version of maybe their best instructor. It's kind of
right.
the best thing you were able to pick up from them. But then if you look at those that have gone on to really do wonderful things, it's amazing. You can see, they're pulling this from over here. They studied with this person
Right.
for a few months. It's so cool to see their work evolve. Even like you were saying, how tight you were versus how loose you were. You've kept growing, you've kept developing. So that's so fun to hear how those two different, kind of art stops along your journey played a role.
Yeah, definitely a work in progress.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. I wanted you to start perhaps with what people could expect if they took your Sentient course, and then maybe something, either a workshop that you took that you learned a lot from, like along your way, or maybe one that you would like to take that you hope you could take one day. I don't, whichever one of those you want to answer. Mark, do you think there's one of those that's better the answer than the other? I know Mark always wants to know who you've studied with. Mark always wants to know that. So,
I always want to know the lineage. That's my
So maybe share like what's on your course on Sentient, and then who you've studied from, like one person that you really appreciated or something like that.
Okay. There's one other artist I didn't mention, so I'll try to do that. For my Sentient course, that was kind of a fun thing to develop. And so I do teach still, in-person workshops and classes. And so for the Sentient workshop, I wanted to try to basically do a little bit of what I can't do as well in a short workshop, which was really give a wider range from the real basic, like we were talking about from PCC. I wanted to start with, here's drawing, and here's shape, and here's space and perspective, and it's an overview. It's not like super detailed, but I wanted to kind of show that progression, so that you start with that simple lesson and understanding, here's all these pieces that form the basics of the basis of our understanding. And so I started it that way, limited palette painting, and it's all focused on landscape. So it's landscape painting fundamentals. And so then I just tried to, with each lesson, take a piece. So there's a value lesson, and there's a color. The color lesson is broken down into two separate ones. Edges and texture. I mean, so we go through that whole thing, and I tried to do a lot of demonstrating of some of those ideas, even if it wasn't like a full painting. I was trying to show, like, here's what I'm talking about with, different kinds of perspective or things like that. So I tried to build it from a way that hopefully somebody even who were sort of new to it could maybe take a bite-sized piece and work away a little bit and get an idea of what goes into it. So that's what you'd get from the landscape painting fundamentals at Sentient. The other artist that I didn't mention and should is Scott Burdick. This was kind of a really neat story. I tried to get into his workshop, and that was while I was still working in graphic design. And I was like, I'm going to think about it overnight, because it was in North Carolina. And I was like, that's going to be an expensive trip. I got to take time off of work. Like, should I really do this? So I was like, I'll think about it overnight, try to decide. So the next day I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to sign up. So I emailed and was like, I want to do the workshop. And he's like, oh, well, it already filled up. And there's a second week that we added, and it already filled up too. So he's like, I'll put you on the waiting list. And I'm like, oh, okay. So, and it was months away. It was like, I don't know, 6 or 8 months away still. So I waited a little while, and I thought, I'm going to email again to see, because I'd love to start making plans if I'm going to go. And so I emailed him again and was like, can I, did anybody back out of the workshop? Can I get in? And he's like, no one's canceled. And he said, but he's like, my wife and I don't mind if serious painters like you want to come out and just paint with us for a few days. You can just come out and you won't have to pay for the workshop. And I was kind of floored. I didn't expect that at all. And I was like, well, absolutely. Like, let me know when to come. So that was really generous of him to do that. I think maybe he had seen, I was in the 21 under 31 in Southwest Art. And that's the only thing I can figure, that maybe he was like, oh, this guy's kind of up and coming. Let's encourage him along, which was super generous of him. And so my wife and I went and spent a few days with him. And he and I just painted. He hired some models, and we painted portraits in his studio for like 3 days. And that was, even though it wasn't a workshop, it was really impactful for me too. And this was in, I think, 2005. And just seeing the dedication he and his wife is Susan Lyon. They're both just excellent artists. And just seeing the way they had things set up in their studios and their work ethic, and just their ability that they had developed really inspired me a lot. And I think, as I looked back on it afterwards, I was like, man, I should have just spent more time watching Scott paint, because he gave me a few tips, off and on, and came over, and I remember him scrubbing out a part of the portrait I was doing and totally simplifying it for the better. And I was like, man, I should have just stood there and watched him instead of trying to paint with him, but I did get another chance to paint with him on another trip, which was nice. But anyway, that was really generous of him. And I definitely owe him something for what he just generously, gave to me from that offer. So that was really exciting.
Wow. That's super special. I'm so glad you got to do that. And especially after the whole workshop thing fell through.
I know. Yeah, it was very, I wasn't expecting that at all. So really, really cool of him to do that. Yeah, my website is danschultzfineart.com. Schultz with a C, SCH. And my Instagram is Dan Schultz Art. And the Vision X, I'm going to be doing a discussion about high key painting, which is just painting in a lighter value and color range. And it's partially with the thought of maybe eventually doing a course on that for Sentient, if I do kind of want to try to do that. They're thinking if it would be kind of a, figure outdoors, high key combination would be something kind of unique to do. So I'm going to try to share a lot of my, high key pieces that I've painted and talk a little bit about sort of what pushed me into going that direction color wise, and some of the things to think about when doing that. So anyway, yeah, it should be fun.
Oh boy. Once again, we are so grateful to Dan for taking the time to join us on the podcast today. You can visit www.danschultzfineart.com if you want to view his art. Also, like he said, he has that storefront in Ojai. So if you are a listener anywhere near there in California, go stop by, knock on Dan's window, tell him that the Burrell brothers say hi on our behalf. And then you can also find his work on Instagram at Dan Schultz Art to stay updated on what he's doing. He had a giveaway recently, which was super cool. So you can follow him there to see if he's going to do another one of those.
As always, subscribe to the Creative Community Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and SoundCloud for more episodes like this one. And leave us a comment or review if you had a favorite part of this episode that stood out to you, or something that Dan said that really made an impact. That helps the algorithm know that you enjoyed it, and that other people like you would enjoy it. And speaking of other people like you, if you have a friend that you think would benefit from what Dan had to say today, feel free to send this episode to them so that they can listen to what he shares about just his journey in art and the things he's learned.
You can connect with us, the Creative Community Podcast, on Facebook and Instagram at Destination Arete, ARETE, for more interviews like this one, as well as we put up notifications about upcoming community activities and Arete projects that we're working on. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with another interview. So we will see you then.